The green 330 GTC that I have in my shop that I'm preparing for a concours had a small oil leak at the valve cover gasket. I figured now was a good time to pull it off and reseal the gasket, and while I was in there, do a valve adjustment and just to check to see if there was anything going on inside. Okay, that's out. So this should pop out. You hope. It's coming. She's coming. No sealant. So sometimes people don't use sealant on these things, and I just feel like there's a certain age in which these things just, they're not going to seal without some sort of RTV. Now let's take a quick peek at the valve train. Looks pretty clean. Little marks here and there, but nothing major. Although that's a shit ton of valve clearance right there, I think. Oh, that's not good. I don't like that one. Let me show you what I found. Normally, you get these rollers and they're smooth and they follow the camshaft. This one has a little bit of a mark on it, but it's not too bad. You know, I have to take a closer look at it, but there is a mark there. But you keep here and all of a sudden you look at this. See how rough that is? That is not good. And you can feel it. The bushing, I think, yep, there's way too much play. Look at the way the bushing's rattling along. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to take this one out and take a look and find out what's worn. It's probably just a bushing, but let's just hope that's all it is. Good thing to open up and take a peek. So taking off this rocker to check out this this bad roller follower, we find a little bit of marking on the lobe of the cam. Compared to the one next to it, it's smooth, and this one's starting to get a little marked up. Whether or not we could put this back together, that's up to question. I took the valve cover off the other side to check all the rollers and make sure that they were nice and smooth and rolling freely with no marks. And unfortunately, I found another one. Look at this. Look at the amount of play. That shouldn't flop around. That should just roll, but it has chewed up the tie with the cam, or at least it's working its way through the cam. I'm going to pull this rocker out and see what kind of damage it did. So I've had a conversation with the owner about this and just kind of said, hey, listen, you know, I'm just checking the rockers, and he said, oh, I've only gotten, you know, a few miles on an engine rebuild. And I said, an engine rebuild? I mean, 200 miles or whatever, or however many miles he had on this engine, and that roller has worn out like that? I mean, that's almost impossible. I mean, it's like, that's I mean, I guess it could if it completely seized, but I gotta imagine if somebody had rebuilt the engine and put this thing together, they would have noticed the roller wasn't adjusting. But stranger things have happened, you know, but I started to question, so how much work was really done on this car? Was it really an engine rebuild? And without really looking over the receipts and talking to the other engine builder, whom I know, I was like, I don't think they do this type of work. Like, this would happen like this. So it's really kind of confused as to what was going on. So I suspect that this engine's bottom end was done for reasons I'm not going to really get into here. But I don't know if the head work was actually really done. So the question I have is that maybe the heads were just taken off when they did the bottom end and maybe just put back on the car. Now, I always say there is 3 sides to every story. And what happened here, perhaps, is that there was a bottom end issue. They found out what was the problem. They said, this is how we would fix it. There's no reason to do anything on the top. But the engine still had to come completely apart. Heads had to come off, but it's literally amount of hours. And I said, you'll know very quickly whether or not the engine was really rebuilt by the amount of hours. I mean, it just takes a certain amount of hours to rebuild an engine. If you were charged X amount of hours and there was no head work, it's probably half the amount of hours. Most of the work is in the heads. So I don't know how much work was done on the heads, but maybe these heads were done a while ago and then put back on the car. And it's hard to catch something like this that might be starting to go bad. I mean, because that's the question I have, is like the rest of this engine, when you look at these rollers, they can move and everything, but unless you check everything, it's hard to see like which one is starting to fail, if a bushing's going bad. I mean, sometimes we just replace them all because you start new, they all start with a baseline. The other issues that we have also on these cars is that some of this replacement part stuff is lowering in quality. So it can change in hardness. There's all sorts of issues. So like, it's really tricky for us as engine builders to build these things right, because sometimes our suppliers change, sometimes the hardness and the materials change, and then all of a sudden we start having issues. Then we fix them, but usually there's a period of time which we start to find out that there's a bad batch of something going around, and all of a sudden we're having failures that we never had before. We have to either do warranty repairs or all this other stuff and make our vendors pay or somehow, but we end up losing because we're the engine builders. So it's a real dilemma as far as like doing an engine right or doing it where the customer says, look, I can't afford to do a whole engine, or I just got this engine done and now we have a problem with one of these cylinders, let's fix it. Just fix the cylinder and put it back together. And in the customer's eye, no offense to them, they spent a ton of money fixing, even if it was half the engine rebuilt, they spent a ton of money. So in their mind is, hey, this is a fresh engine. This is a fresh engine. They tell everybody it's a fresh engine. Well, actually, it wasn't a fresh engine. It was done to fix the thing that was done. Yes, it was fresh, sure, because someone else might have done engine work prior to this, and you foot the bill to do it again, to do certain things that were wrong. And then when you have failures like this, the first thing that pops in your head is, I've been telling everybody I had a fresh engine rebuild, and now why is this thing failing? Well, it wasn't really an engine rebuild. So, that's some of the issues. So this cam lobe is showing a little bit of wear. This one's better than the other side. It doesn't look like it's worn past the hardening of the surface. So I think this one's okay. This one, I think we can replace the roller and we might be okay. Why this roller failed, I'm not sure. I have to check the bushing. There's a bushing in there. The adjusters look okay. Nope. A little bit of a mark on that one. But that's not the bad one. So we'll have to keep looking, but I think that this one might survive. So let's keep looking at this engine and figure out the rest of it. But tops of the valves look okay. I mean, internally the engine looks fresh. I mean, it looks clean. It doesn't look like there's a lot of sludge in there. So who knows why this one and that one and the other one on the other side failed. But this cam looks okay. The other side, the cam, not so great, but I'm going to talk to some of my friends who are in this business and ask them for advice what they would think. But again, none of us have crystal balls. We can't figure out whether or not this damaged lobe is going to last, 50,000 miles or 20,000 miles, or, and sometimes these guys figure, okay, well, this guy's only going to drive like 5,000 miles and it will not show up in 5,000 miles if you keep on this cam. But the other issues that we have is when I make this repair, I'm the one who put my hand on this car. So if another roller fails, or if another one starts to seize and roll and start to fail, and this owner takes it to another shop one day and they take it up or take everything apart and take a look at everything, and they're like, oh, look, Tom did this engine and it's already failing with the rollers. Why? That means Tom's not a good mechanic. He doesn't know what he's doing. Or why did he bodge this car together? Well, like I said, there's 3 sides to every story. Owner says, I don't want to rebuild this engine. I don't want to send the cams out. New cams to this car, although I wouldn't recommend new cams because you can fix 1 or 2 lobes for hundreds, but not thousands. New cams for this engine, I just bought a set for $8,000. I think it was $7,000 to $8,000, and it was a several month wait because they're kind of backlogged with all this work. So it's not an easy thing to do to get these cams, welded and hardened and everything back together again. It's still going to take time. So there's time crunches, there's all sorts of stuff. But anyway, if I were to do this and I said, okay, this one we'll clean up, we'll put a new roller in it, I'll check the other ones just to make sure they're not seizing or they don't show excessive play, and button the engine up. But that doesn't mean that I said this car is going to last forever. But the owner is certainly going to tell people, hey, Tom's worked on this car and it's good to go. Well, if you want something that's good to go, you technically have to do the whole thing. But I don't recommend doing the whole thing. It doesn't necessarily need it. I think that if the roller is failing and there's some bushing material in the oil, it's probably a good idea to change the oil and clean things out. If it's showing that much wear, that bushing material is ending up somewhere, and it's in the oil, and it's being circulated in the engine. Is that a bad thing? Yeah, well, it's never a good thing. But that's the issues that you deal with as a mechanic and dealing with these engine rebuilds. It's like, it's not a full engine rebuild unless you started from scratch and rebuilt everything. And even then they're failures because the supplies are bad and the vendors are bad and the all sorts of stuff. Gaskets are bad. So you try your best to make these engines work without, trying to guarantee your work, trying to stand behind your work. But then all of a sudden the owners are using your name to say, hey, this is a great engine, but all I did was a tune-up, or all I did was fix 1 bad roller. And all of a sudden I've got my name on it. And that's not, I always joke about it. I says, owners tend to have amnesia when it comes to what they actually did when it's time to sell the car. They don't necessarily say, oh yeah, I got into an accident and I had it fixed really cheaply just to get it painted and handed it down the road. They tell people, hey, this car has been painted and it was great. I spent a lot of money. Let's say they spent half the money to fix the, a fender bender, but you think that's going to come up when I tell the sale? No, it's a buyer beware. And it's the same thing with engines. It's like, an engine rebuild can be anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. So even if you spent half the amount of money and got, quote unquote, a cheap engine rebuild for $50,000 or less, which I've heard people spend that, less than that, to do an engine rebuild, it's still a shit ton of money. It's still a ton of money to rebuild an engine. So in their mind, even though they didn't spend $100,000, they still spent tens of thousands of dollars. So in their mind, they said, I got a full engine rebuild. But was it a full engine rebuild, or was it just a freshening up? Did they you know, check the boards? Did they replace the liners? Did they replace all the rockers? Did they change every single bushing? Did they change every single piece in this? Did they check the side play on all the rockers? Or did they put the whole thing back together and just call it a day? That's the difference in hours. So then all of a sudden, you know, they're selling the car, they put your name on it because you said, just like I said, I didn't do it in an engine rebuild, but I did fix something, but my name gets attached to this car. So it's a real sticky situation as far as like fixing these engines. I do want to fix these things pragmatically. Does this engine need a complete engine rebuild because we have two bad rollers? No, but the work that I do is just to repair the problem. My advice is, what I would do, and this is even if it were my car, I wouldn't want to replace this cam if it looks good, or take it out and weld it. I mean, there's a lot of work to take these cams out. But I would put the roller in and I would do regular valve adjustments. I would check that on a regular basis to see if other rollers go bad. You know, the Ferrari sells 8,000 mile valve adjustments. Or if a guy drives 1,000 miles a year, it'll be 8 years from now. Was he going to still remember to tell the next guy, oh yeah, by the way, I got a bad roller. When he sells the car, you should check the other rollers. And he's not going to tell him that. So again, it's a tough situation on these cars, but that's the nature of used cars, I guess. And that happens in all cars. Just with Ferraris, a little bit more expensive. Okay, so this is where we're at with the valve train. As you can see, like I showed you before, the clearance on the ones that were really worn out are really loose. They're just wallowing around. Not all of them were like that. Some of them had decent clearance on them, where you can put them in and you can feel how tight these slide in, and they spin with very little play, where they had enough for the oil, but were fine as far as clearance was concerned. But the decision was made to just go ahead and replace all the rollers, because of the handful, which I have 4 of them here that failed. They're all pretty loose. It wasn't worth the chance to just not replace all of them. And the other thing I also did was I went ahead and replaced the tappets too, simply because there were a couple that were chipped, and you know, just not knowing any of the suppliers and worrying about the other ones that had failed, I figured the best thing to do is just start from scratch and replace all the rollers, all the tappets, and start from there. The bushings, or these pins, were okay. They looked pretty good. There was no real wear. And so what I did was I got new ones of these, and they're slightly different in color. If you look at this, you know, the old ones, they were a little darker, and the new ones tend to have this light color brass color. I wasn't super happy with them. They had a little bit of rust on the sides. I think they were just stored incorrectly, or they were stored in a container or in a plastic bag, and I think they got a little bit of corrosion. If you could see, there's just like this corrosion here. I'll have to put this on my lathe, spin it up, and just kind of sand down the surface rust. And then once these things get oiled, they should be fine. Polish the faces of this thing, and then they get installed. I mean, what will happen is they get pressed in. There's a C-clip that holds everything together. You check all the adjustments, and then you also change these little tappets. I've got the last set here. I just have to do, and then we'll be good to go. So that was all the work that I did. I mean, I already replaced all of them. I put them all back in, and I just got one more to do, and then we could put this engine back together. But thanks for watching.